YouTube, Awesome Writer here. Welcome to my review for BoonBoomger episode 9. So this episode was kind of the conclusion of the first chapter of BoonBoomger. It kind of made it all feel like one large origin story to get these 5 together, to learn the basis of the plot and the motivations, and then now we're going to move into a second arc. I think they even released like a second arc poster, which was really nice, and I think it was really well done overall. And I want to say at the top, I still really am enjoying the show, especially compared to Gotchard, which is such a nice, pleasant surprise because of all the worries I had going into this, that it was going to feel similar to Gotchard, back to basics, a little bit hollow, really annoying, but it's been much more well-balanced and I've enjoyed it much more and been much more invested in it than I thought. And again, I hate to take jabs at Gotchard all the time, but it's like, man, I was really worried that all of superhero time was going to be crap for this year for me. And so I'm very pleasantly surprised with the show overall, despite some little nitpicks here and there. I did really enjoy this episode. I'm still on board with the show, and there was a lot I liked about it, but I do have some mixed feelings about certain aspects of the motivations. But I just wanted to state that overall, I still really am enjoying the show quite a bit, and genuinely look forward to it every week, and so much about it has grown on me overall. So last week we learned Taiya's motivation was to get into this Grand Prix race, and that was why he was doing this, and we kind of knew that they weren't the strict motivations of most Sentai being brought together for justice, and the team kind of flipped out. And I have mixed feelings about that in the sense that it's understandable that they have some sort of reaction to it and mixed feelings about the fact that he's putting them in danger for this, but it also felt a bit over the top, especially since it's not like he was being callous with human lives. You know what I mean? Like, if this had been in episode 1 or 2 and he wasn't caring about saving people, like, oh, you have these resources and you're not saving people, or he was reckless, then it would make sense. But he is still using his powers to save people and very clearly cares about people. So they were acting like he'd been reckless the whole time and it was like leaving citizens to get run over by cars while he was off racing or something. So I just felt those reactions needed to be calibrated a little bit, especially Black Ranger, who I'm still not the biggest fan of. He's just really annoying and self-righteous, and his like performance about justice and stuff feels really forced and hollow. You know, there are other characters that will spout out those cheesy lines and stuff and I'll just believe them, but for him, I just don't believe in him. It feels very manufactured and cartoony, and I'm just not a fan. And same thing with Pink, because she also felt so flighty and she had her own selfish reasons about kind of doing this to, not that she's not a good person, but she's kind of doing this to, or started off doing this because she was trying to chart her own path. And so, I don't know. The reaction is understandable, but I feel it needed to be calibrated a little bit because they were acting like Taiya had presented as this uncaring person, and even if it was a secondary motivation to protect people, he was still doing it. And so we find out about why that happened. Oh, and also, kind of like I predicted last week, you have the Inspector Lady coming in to shut the BoonBoomgers down after discovering this motivation. I thought it would have made more sense for her to try to take over because, as she mentioned, they're their greatest defense, and the idea of shutting them down because of this revelation rather than trying to make use of them in a different way didn't make sense to me. But anyway, that's when we find out about the motivation, and effectively it's like, you find out, and there's still some mystery to it, there's still some holes to fill in. You have, actually it was BoomBot that used to be a racer for this Grand Prix, and he got disqualified for some reason. That's something we don't know why he got disqualified, so I like that's a little bit of an open mystery. He wound up landing on our Earth, Bumblebee style, you know, you hear doo, 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 doo. Arrival on Earth is such a great score song. Anyway, he arrived, Taiya found him, and then Taiya effectively is trying to achieve this dream for BoomBot. And the idea is, it's really funny actually. It actually, in a lot of ways, it's meant to be sincere, but this reminds me of Car Ranger in the parody aspect. I don't think it's meant to be, but it reads that way to me because of how stupid it is. But the idea is he's a delivery man, and he wants to deliver BoomBot's dream to him by doing this. And it's played sincere, but it reminds me in Car Ranger how they come up with this ridiculous mythology that's clearly ridiculous and stupid, but they're taking it seriously and it comes across as parody, and it reminded me of that. And like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's so, it's like, it's cheesy, but it's not even cheesy like, and it makes sense. It's cheesy and like, what? That's stupid. But I do find it very refreshing that he's not a self-righteous generic, like, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, and the people's Earth smiles hopes, and like all the generic stuff that, what's his face, Joe would say. Or, like this week in Gotchard, where they have a really generic, hollow, inspirational speech about the motivations and the inspiration of Kamen Rider, and I feel that it doesn't feel earned at all. So I do find it refreshing to have something a little bit different there. And I do feel the genuineness in his performance. Like, I still like Taiya, but just on paper, I'm like, that's really stupid. And then the way the team gets behind him, I guess they're inspired by the fact that he's helping a friend to such a good degree. But that's just where I have the mixed feelings, where I feel like, on one hand, it feels like they're all coming to their own conclusion of why they want to support Taiya, which is kind of nice. But it also feels a little bit like that falling in line. Like, I hate that when Sentai or writer has everyone falling in line behind the main character instead of thinking for themselves. Especially Pink saying, like, I'm taking the wheel for myself because your dream is to achieve BoomBot's dream for him, and my dream is to achieve that for you. I'm like, why does it have to be that? Like, couldn't it just be that? I think her motivation still being here to find her own path and to take the wheel for herself would make more sense. Orange still seems to be there because he wants a front row seat for all this. Black Ranger being like, I'm gonna protect your dream, and I'm just like, shut up. I'm very interested about Blue Ranger, though, because I honestly thought we would get his flashback episode where we learned how he joined the BoomBoomgers and met Taiya before we learned about the backstory of Taiya. So I'm really curious about that because he obviously was more in defense of Taiya and seems more understanding, and I'm really curious about that. But in general, I wish it was a little bit more leaning towards they more respected and understood Taiya for what he was doing and acknowledged that he was still helping people even if it wasn't the main goal, but found a reason to be a BoomBoonger for themselves rather than it being they're going to be Boonders for themselves for Taiya's sake. Like, I don't know, I just didn't like them all falling in line behind his goal. I think it's important to support him, I guess, as a team, but I think it would have been nicer if they all had their own reasons to be there. So that bothered me a little bit, on top of the fact that the whole delivery angle borders on parody with how ridiculous it is. But then, like, again, you kind of get this whole vibe of because of this, the team's all united under one goal now, so you get the all-together fight. Again, some really good fight scenes in the series. We debut the night form, which had a little bit of build-up, which is really nice. And I do think this, like, little arc was overall well-paced. Like, there were some bits that were a little more rushed than I was expecting with the debut of Orange and whatnot, but in general, in terms of the way the Rangers were debuted and the mech forms were debuted, and the fact that we sat with the core team of 3 for a little bit, I really liked. I think that could it have been a little bit better, maybe a couple more episodes and stretch things out? Sure, but in the context of Toku, especially the early parts where they kind of always rush it for certain reasons, I thought this was pretty tightly well-paced, where I had little nitpicks, but it overall didn't affect it, and I felt like I got a good grasp on the characters and the dynamic and the setup, and I really did appreciate that. And then at the end, you just kind of have a nice, like, all-together scene of them eating curry together, and the inspector gives a gift of BoomBot's favorite performer. I think it was from that previous thing. So yeah, I did really like the episode. I enjoyed it. I really did. I've really been enjoying the series. I love, also, before I forget it, the score when Taiya shows up. They've used that track a couple times. I really love that. It's an instrumental. I much prefer the instrumentals, and I still did enjoy it. I want to be clear about that, and I'm much more on board with the series than I thought. I like the unconventional motivations and setup. I still think there's some lingering questions about, where BoomBot came from, why did he get kicked out? This new aspect of the race can bring in potentially interesting players to the series. There's still mystery, and I'm curious about Blue Ranger's backstory, but I just do have mixed feelings about some of the motivations in that, the whole lining up behind the main character thing, and the delivery thing is funny. It doesn't make me mad. The delivery thing doesn't make me mad, I want to be clear. I just do find it to be kind of ridiculous, even though I do appreciate the unique aspect of it. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.